He's the weakest kid in a school full of monsters, and he's already killed a monster nobody else could touch. A cocky #1 swordsman signs away his freedom on a bet he thinks he can't lose. He's about to find out he already lost. A teacher's hands shake in front of a screaming crowd, and the loser she believed in is the only one who steps up to defend her. A boy's own arm turns to dust in front of him, and somehow that's not even the worst thing that happens to him this year. A third year thinks splitting his team up will save his own skin. It gets him burned alive instead. And somewhere in a future that never gets to happen, the strongest people who ever lived get wiped out in under a second, and one broken support soldier gets sent back to stop it. Rewind way back, before any of that. This is the story of Gray, and it starts with him standing in front of the entire academy, about to get called out as a fraud, except the joke's on everyone laughing at him. The opening ceremony at the World Union Academy is supposed to be boring. Speeches, banners, some old professor droning on about legacy and excellence. Instead, it turns into a public execution, except the guy being executed hasn't even shown up yet. Leon Hart-Apios, ranked #1 freshman, walks up in front of everybody and calls out a ghost. Word's been going around that some nobody got into the academy through a back door, a special VIP admission called the Divine Eye, where one instructor can just point at a random kid and say, "This one's special," without any trials, any tests, any proof. Leon thinks that's an insult to everyone who actually earned their spot. So he stands there, in front of the whole freshman class, and demands the backdoor student step forward and hand over the uniform. Nobody moves. Because nobody in that crowd knows they're standing 3 feet away from someone who's already killed a monster that could level a town. That someone is Gray. And Gray just stands there, saying nothing, while people who don't know a thing about him decide exactly who he is. Here's the part where it gets good. A teacher named Ariel, the one who actually used her divine eye to bring Gray in, teleports into the middle of the ceremony and does something completely unhinged. She bets her entire job. She bets the expulsion of every divine eye student in the school, all of it, on one target, an ogre general, one of those disaster-class monsters that normally takes a full squad of trained soldiers just to slow down. Leon signs the contract on the spot, cocky as ever, thinking there's no way this loser he's never met can out-hunt him on something that dangerous. He has no clue Gray already killed that exact tier of monster weeks before he ever set foot on campus. That's the hook. That's the whole game. Everyone around Gray thinks they're looking at a nobody who cheated his way in. What they're actually looking at is a war veteran wearing a teenager's body. So how does a random freshman end up sitting on that kind of secret? Let's rewind further. Way further. 15 years further, actually. Except it's a rewind into a future that technically hasn't happened yet. Picture the worst day imaginable. Not a bad day. The actual end of everything. A continent-erasing monstrosity called the Liquidator is tearing through the last defense humanity's got left, and the people trying to stop it are legends. Real, world-shaking legends. Names people whispered like prayers. And the Liquidator goes through every single one of them like they're nothing. Not a fight, not a struggle. Just gone, in less time than it takes to blink. Gray watches it happen. He's not one of the legends. He's support, the guy who patches people up, who covers retreats, who's built to die first so someone more important gets one more second to live. And when it's his turn, when he's bleeding out on a battlefield stacked with the corpses of the greatest warriors the world ever produced, he doesn't even get to be angry. He just realizes, with total clarity, that none of it mattered. All the training, all the sacrifice, all the deaths, it bought nothing. The world still ends. That's when something steps in. A towering, horned figure who calls himself Kronos. And instead of letting Gray die quietly in the wreckage of a lost war, Kronos yanks him 15 years into the past. Body, memories, and one seriously unstable dark power sealed away inside him. And gives him a shot nobody gets. A redo. Gray wakes up back in his hometown. 15 years old. Weak little teenage body, right arm barely functional, none of the muscle or conditioning he built over a lifetime of war. But his head is still full of everything. Every fight, every mistake, every scrap of future magic theory nobody in this era has figured out yet. He's a veteran soldier trapped inside a kid who hasn't thrown his first real punch. First order of business? Unfinished business. There's a bully back in his hometown named Velder, and in the life Gray remembers, this guy made his childhood miserable. The kind of damage that doesn't just bruise your body, it scars something deeper. So Gray goes and finds him, and it is not close. Velder swings something slow and basic, the kind of attack that would have terrified old Gray, and new Gray just steps around it like it's nothing, disarms him, and calmly uses a blunt training sword to knock his teeth out and scatter his entire crew of thugs in front of everyone. No speeches, no monologue, just a total humiliating shutdown of a guy who spent years thinking he was untouchable. That's beat one. Quiet, personal, satisfying. And it's just the warm-up. Because Gray's not planning to coast on old grudges. He's got a countdown running in his head, and he knows exactly where he needs to be to survive what's coming. He seeks out a dojo master from his hometown, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Zarya, and asks her to train him. The second she sees him move, she knows something's off. This beginner is throwing forms way above his supposed skill level. So she doesn't ask questions. She just puts him through 8 brutal months of conditioning, rebuilding a body that hasn't caught up to the mind living inside it. Here's the twist nobody sees coming, not even Zarya. Gray remembers something from his old life. She's supposed to die, not eventually, soon. Killed fighting off an ogre nest that's about to swarm the area, and in the future Gray came from, she goes down alone, protecting people who never even know how close it got. So Gray doesn't wait around. He tracks the danger, finds her, and flat out refuses to let her walk into that fight without him. Which is how they both end up ambushed deep in an ogre den by something way above their pay grade. A full ogre general, the same tier of monster Leon Hart, is going to sign a life-binding contract to hunt months later. Except this time it's not a bet. It's real, it's now, and Gray is completely out of options. So he cracks the seal. For the first time since he woke up in this timeline, Gray lets his dark power out. And it is not subtle. His blade goes pitch black, that unstable future energy pouring through a body way too young to safely hold it. And he doesn't just fight the ogre general. He goes through the entire pack in one continuous, brutal swing. Saves the village, saves Zarya. Collapses into a 5-day coma the second the adrenaline runs out. Because that power doesn't come free. It never does. When he wakes up, the whole town's waiting outside. People he grew up around, people who watched him get bullied his whole childhood, now standing there cheering, pooling together their own savings just to help fund his tuition at the World Union Academy. It's the kind of moment that actually lands, because it's earned. This isn't a random reward. It's people recognizing someone who bled for them. But recognition from a village is one thing. Getting into the most prestigious combat academy on the planet is another problem entirely. And Gray shows up to his entrance exam with a right arm that's still barely usable from the ogre fight. Late, injured. Basically fighting with one hand tied behind his back before he even starts. He faces the sword examiner left-handed. And he doesn't win, not clean anyway. He fights the guy to a dead-even draw using only his offhand, against an opponent whose entire job is testing the best young talent in the world. That's enough. Combined with Ariel's divine eye pull, it's enough to get him in. Which brings us right back around to that opening ceremony. Now you know what Leon Hart didn't. Now you know why Ariel bet her whole career without blinking. The backdoor loser the entire freshman class is ready to laugh out of the academy. Already slaughtered the exact monster they're about to hunt him with. The first real spark happens in magic class. Instructors love throwing new students into sparring pairs to gauge their level. And of course Gray gets stuck across from Leon, the guy who publicly humiliated him days earlier, still furious about signing away his freedom on a bet he assumed was safe. Leon comes in expecting an easy, embarrassing win to save face. What he gets is Gray losing control of a spell that was never supposed to be dangerous. Aether bullets are basic. First week of class basic. Every student in that room has fired one. But Gray isn't casting it the way the future is supposed to teach it. He's compressing it using a technique from a war that hasn't happened yet, cramming way more raw power into the spell than any instructor in the room even knows is possible. The result isn't a bullet. It's closer to an explosion. It tears straight through the teacher's protective barrier, blows out half the classroom, and sends Leon Hart, ranked #1, untouchable golden boy, flying like he weighs nothing. Silence. Actual, dead silence. Because everyone just watched the charity case casually break a spell they've been told is basic and safe. Leon doesn't take it well. Not at first. His ego's cracked wide open, and for a while it's pure hostility. The resentment of a guy who spent his whole life being the best, suddenly staring down someone who makes it look effortless without even trying. But cracks like that don't stay cracks forever. The more Gray keeps proving himself, the more that hostility starts twisting into something else. Respect he doesn't want to admit to. Curiosity he can't shake. Give it time, and the loudest hater in that opening ceremony turns into the guy fighting to train alongside him. That's Arc 1. Bully dismantled, village saved, academy infiltrated. And a classroom explosion that makes sure nobody at the World Union Academy underestimates the backdoor student twice. But the Academy's got way bigger problems than one arrogant swordsman's ego, and Gray's about to walk straight into them. There's a teacher named Ariel who introduces Gray to another student the moment he settles in, a blue-haired girl named Bella. In the future, Gray remembers, Bella becomes the strongest sorcerer alive. In this timeline, right now, she's about to be strapped down for an experimental magic surgery pushed by a professor named Bradley. A procedure that's less medical breakthrough and more horrifying. Gray knows exactly how this ends if nobody steps in. So he steps in. Instead of letting her go under Bradley's knife, Gray teaches her something no one in this era should know yet. A life force theory called Odo. Future magic that lets her unlock the same raw potential the surgery was chasing, without carving her open to get it. It works. She's safe. And Gray's just quietly rewritten another life that was supposed to end badly. Except that only makes Gray more curious about what exactly Bradley's been doing behind closed doors. So he, Ariel, and Bella go dig. They infiltrate Bradley's mountain laboratory, and what they find isn't just unethical, it's a full-blown horror show. Human experiments. Catalysts built from people. Gray doesn't hesitate. He unleashes his dark power again, this time to end Bradley personally, right there in the lab he built his crimes in. And underneath it all, they find something worse than the lab itself. A massive hidden underground city, with a portal actively leaking energy that feels exactly like the thing that erased Gray's entire world in the future. Not a rumor, not a theory. Proof that whatever's coming for humanity down the line has already got roots buried under this academy. That's where we're going next. Because Bradley's death doesn't end the conspiracy, it just makes the people funding him panic. A modified assassin gets sent straight at Gray in the middle of a school tournament. A corrupt teacher sabotages an entire class expedition and tries to bury the evidence in a fake storm. And Gray's own dark power turns on him hard enough to cost him an arm. Leon moves first, and it's not reckless, it's calculated. The kind of opening move a guy makes when he's spent his whole life being the fastest person in every room and finally has a real reason to prove it matters. He closes the gap in a blink, blade already swinging for Medu's exposed side. She doesn't dodge, she doesn't need to. A thin ripple of that magenta energy flares off her skin, and Leon's blade stops dead, like it hit a wall made of pressure instead of matter. The impact alone sends a shockwave through the room, cracking stone underfoot, and Leon gets thrown back a solid 10 feet before he even registers what happened. He's up fast, sliding to a stop, breathing hard, and for the first time in this entire trial, genuinely rattled. "Cute," Medu says, like she's grading homework. Luniel doesn't give her time to enjoy it. She comes in low, fast, aiming for the legs while Medu's attention is split, and for a second it actually works. She draws blood, a thin line across Medu's calf that should slow anyone down. Medu doesn't even flinch. That's the part that sinks into all three of them at once. Pain isn't a factor here. Whatever Bradley did to his own daughter stripped away the thing that normally makes a fight fair. Gray's the one who finally makes contact that means something. He doesn't go for a flashy opening. He watches, actually watches, the way a veteran watches, cataloging the half-second delay between Medu's energy flaring and her body actually moving, because that delay is the only opening a fight like this is going to offer. When it comes, he's already moving, blade angled low, vital force running clean and separate from the dark power sealed inside him, exactly the way months of brutal, arm-destroying training taught him to keep it. The hit lands. Actually lands. Medu takes half a step back, first genuine reaction she's shown since this fight started, and for just a second the bored look slips off her face. "So the rumors were real," she says, and there's something sharper in her voice now. The backdoor student bites. That's the moment the fight actually becomes a fight instead of Medu casually toying with outmatched first years. She stops holding back. The magenta fog thickens around her, curling into shapes that don't look natural, and the temperature in the room noticeably drops as whatever's fueling her starts pulling harder. Leon and Luniel fall into position without needing to be told. flanking, drawing attention, forcing Medu to split her focus across 3 angles instead of 1. It's not going to win the fight outright, none of them are under that illusion, but it buys Gray something he desperately needs: openings. Room to actually use everything he's spent this entire year rebuilding. He thinks about the Ogre General, about the ambush in that den, weaponless, outnumbered, nothing left to do but crack the seal and let the dark power out because the alternative was watching Zarya die in front of him. He thinks about Radha's chest tearing open in the arena, about diving toward a threat everyone else was running from because that's just what you do when you've already lived through worse. He doesn't crack the seal yet, not fully. This isn't a fight he wants to solve by risking his own arm again, not with 2 teammates counting on him to still be standing afterward. Instead, he leans into the isolated vital force technique, the one he bled and lost a limb to actually master, pouring it into strike after strike with total precision, never overextending, never giving Medu the sloppy opening she's clearly hoping for. It's working. Slowly, grindingly, but it's working. Medu's not used to being worn down. Everything about her posture says she expected this fight to be over in under a minute, the way it was with Bard, and every extra second it drags on visibly chips away at that bored confidence. She starts pressing harder, faster, that magenta fog lashing out in wider arcs, and Luniel takes a glancing hit across the shoulder that spins her hard into a stone pillar. Leon's there before she hits the ground, catching her, dragging her back out of range while Gray steps in to cover the gap. This is the difference between this fight and the one that got Bard killed. Nobody's fighting alone. Nobody's treating the others as expendable. When one of them drops, someone's already moving to close the hole. Medu notices. And for the first time, something that isn't boredom or amusement crosses her face. Something closer to genuine irritation. "You people actually care about each other," she says, like it's the strangest thing she's encountered all week. That's going to get you killed slower, not saved. Gray doesn't answer her. He's got nothing to say to someone wearing grief and rage like a weapon, twisted into whatever her father turned her into before Gray ever put him down. There's no version of this conversation that changes anything. There's only the fight, and the fight is the only argument that matters right now. He goes on the offensive again, pushing the pace, forcing Medu to react instead of dictate. It's not enough to end this outright. That much becomes clear fast, because whatever power she's running on has depth Gray hasn't found the bottom of yet. But it's enough to hold, enough to keep Luniel breathing, keep Leon on his feet, keep this fortress from claiming a second name off their 4-person team. That's where this particular clash settles for now. Not a clean win, not a clean loss, just 3 first years locked in a brutal standoff against something the Academy itself would classify as above their level, refusing to break the way Bard did. Refusing to fight this thing alone. Now, rewind for a second, because there's a piece of context worth sitting in fully. The tournament fight that first put Radha's tier of power on Gray's radar, because it's the clearest blueprint for exactly what's happening in this fortress right now. When Gray steps into that arena against Radha, nobody watching thinks it's going to be close. 35 years of first years losing this exact matchup sets the expectation before a single blow lands. Radha's reflexes alone put him in a category most freshmen can't touch, let alone match, and the crowd's mostly there to watch the backdoor student get humbled in front of the whole school. Gray doesn't read it that way. He reads Radha's movement the same way he reads Medu's now, cataloging the tells, the delays, the places where enhanced reflexes still can't fully outrun the fact that a human body has limits, even a modified one. It's ugly early. Radha's fast enough to land real damage. Fast enough that Gray's actually bleeding by the midpoint. Fast enough that the crowd starts to believe the streak's about to hit 36 years. Then Gray adjusts. Same as every fight since he woke up in this timeline. Take the hit, learn the pattern, close the gap before the next one lands. By the final exchange, he's not dodging Radha's speed anymore. He's meeting it, matching pace for pace, until the fight comes down to who breaks first. And that's before Radha's chest tears open. Nobody in that arena, Gray included, expects Radha to have a trigger planted inside him, some dormant piece of Liquidator-adjacent energy, sitting there waiting for exactly the wrong moment to go off. When it does, it doesn't just end the fight, it shreds the protective barrier the entire arena's supposed safety depends on, turning a supervised school duel into something that could have killed half the crowd in the front rows. Gray doesn't hesitate, doesn't calculate risk the way a normal 17-year-old would. He throws himself at Radha anyway, dark power flaring just enough to shut the reaction down before it spreads, ending both the fight and the threat in the same violent motion. 35 years of losing streak, broken in the same breath as a near catastrophe averted. That's the pattern Gray's carrying into this fortress fight right now. Enhanced opponents don't fight fair. They don't fight predictably. And the moment you think you've got the measure of them is exactly the moment they change the rules on you. Which is precisely why he's not underestimating Medu Bradley for a second. Even with Leon and Luniel both fighting harder than they've ever fought in their lives beside him. Back in the fortress, the standoff holds. Medu's pressing, the three of them are absorbing and returning every ounce of pressure they can manage, and somewhere beneath all of it, Gray's running the same calculation he ran in that arena. How much longer can this go before someone has to gamble everything to end it? He's got a feeling he already knows the answer. Plotted narrative progression through character arc and training sequence. Plotted narrative progression through character arc and training sequence. Let's rewind again, because the mountain expedition that exposed Wormald deserves way more than a quick summary. It's one of the most calculated near massacres in this whole story, and it's worth walking through exactly how close it comes to working. The setup looks completely routine. A mandatory marching exercise, first years hiking a mountain trail under staff supervision, the kind of low-stakes training day nobody thinks twice about. Except Wormald's been planning this for a while. He's tangled up with the Bloodbrinkers on a level nobody at the Academy suspects, and he's found the perfect cover for a mass casualty event that looks completely accidental. Water lizards. Vicious, high-tier predators that normally stay buried deep in isolated wetlands, nowhere near a mountain trail full of teenagers. They don't just wander into a school expedition. Somebody has to draw them out. And Wormald's the one who does it, using restricted weather manipulation to fake an artificial storm violent enough to flood the lowland dens these things live in, forcing them up onto the exact trail his own students are marching along. It's brutal in its simplicity. No fingerprints, no obvious sabotage, just a freak storm and a pack of predators doing what predators do, with a body count high enough to bury any real investigation under grief and bad luck. The storm hits fast. 1 second, the group's making steady progress up the trail. The next, the sky's ripped open and water's coming down sideways, visibility dropping to nothing, and the first water lizard breaks the tree line before anyone's even finished processing that the weather turned wrong. It's chaos immediately. Students scattering, staff barking orders that half the group can't even hear over the storm, the whole formation collapsing into instinct and panic. Gray doesn't panic. He's seen worse storms than this one. Lived through disasters that make a fake weather event look tame by comparison. What he does instead is watch, and the first thing that catches his attention isn't the lizards, it's Wormald, supposedly caught off guard by the same surprise storm as everyone else, moving with a limp that doesn't line up with anything Gray's seen him do all trip. It's a small thing, easy to miss if you're not specifically looking for lies written into body language, but Gray's spent a lifetime reading soldiers under stress, reading who's actually hurt and who's performing being hurt, and Wormald's performance has a hitch in it that real injuries don't have. Real injuries don't correct themselves for half a second when the person forgets they're supposed to be limping. He files it away, doesn't say anything yet. There's a storm to survive first, and a class full of students who have no idea their own teacher orchestrated the thing trying to kill them. The water lizards hit hard and fast, picking off stragglers at the edges of the group, and for a while it's genuinely close. This isn't some low-tier training obstacle. These things are strong enough to seriously injure or kill an unprepared first year in seconds. Hector's there, doing what he does best, throwing himself into the worst of it to buy the rest of the group time to regroup. Ariel's covering the back line, keeping the injured stabilized, and Gray's cutting a path through the front, isolated vital force running clean through his blade, dropping lizards one after another with the same controlled precision he's been grinding toward since the tournament. But he's also watching Wormald the entire time, and the pattern keeps getting worse. Every time the group starts to actually stabilize, Wormald finds some reason to redirect them, a shortcut that isn't a shortcut, a safer route that conveniently funnels them closer to where the lizards keep spawning. It's subtle, deniable, exactly the kind of sabotage that looks like bad decision-making under pressure instead of deliberate murder, right up until you already know to look for it. Gray decides he's seen enough. He doesn't wait for a quiet moment. He calls it out right there, mid-crisis, in front of the entire group, breaks down Wormald's fake limp, the timing of his shortcuts, The fact that a man supposedly injured just outran 3 students on a muddy incline without a flicker of hesitation. Piece by piece, out loud, so there's no room left for Wormald to spin it as coincidence or panic under fire. Wormald's face does something ugly when he realizes he's been read this cleanly. The mask doesn't just crack, it drops entirely, and for a second, the exhausted, frightened teacher act disappears completely, replaced by something colder. Something that was always underneath. He goes for the kill directly at that point, no more pretense, and it's Hector who steps in, closing the gap fast enough to stop Wormald before he can do real damage to the group he's supposed to be protecting. What follows isn't clean. It's a genuine fight between a corrupt instructor with real combat training and a legendary specialist who's spent years preparing students for exactly this kind of threat, and it takes everything Hector's got to put Wormald down without losing anyone else in the process. Once Wormald's subdued, the real problem surfaces. They're still stranded on a storm-battered mountain, and Wormald was the one who arranged the teleportation extraction as his personal escape route, meaning the group's official way home is compromised by the exact traitor who just got exposed. Gray and Hector track down the teleportation expert Wormald had on standby, and this part isn't subtle either. There's no negotiating with someone who was actively complicit in a plan to kill an entire class of first years. Hector makes it very clear, very directly, that this person's choices are extraction for everyone, or consequences that make Wormald's punishment look gentle. The expert folds fast, and the entire group, students, staff, everyone, gets teleported back to the safety of the academy grounds before the storm can claim anyone else. The fallout hits immediately once they're back. An investigation into Wormald's Bloodbrinker ties turns up enough evidence that there's no version of this that ends in anything but the harshest punishment the academy has on the books. Public execution, torture sentencing, the kind of ending that makes it very clear the school isn't interested in quietly reassigning corrupt staff anymore. Not after 2 attempts on student lives traced back to teachers in the same semester. It's the third conspiracy Gray's personally unraveled since walking through the academy gates. Bradley's lab, Radha's assassination attempt, now Wormald's storm. Each one traces back to something bigger, something still funding and directing all of it from somewhere Gray hasn't found yet. Which brings us to the part of Gray's growth that costs him the most. Literally. After the mountain expedition, once the dust settles and the academy shifts back into a normal training rhythm, an instructor named Ren starts running advanced students through vital force infusion. It's a genuinely useful technique, one that separates competent swordsmen from dangerous ones, pouring your own life force directly into a blade to massively amplify its cutting power. The problem is that it's not something you can fake or shortcut. You either learn to channel your vitality cleanly, or you burn yourself out trying. The Academy's solution for teaching it is about as blunt as it sounds. Demonic swords. Weapons specifically designed to forcibly drain a student's vital force just enough to teach them what the sensation is supposed to feel like, without actually risking their life in the process. Most students walk away from a session exhausted, wobbly, maybe a little pale. A few push too hard and pass out cold before they even finish the exercise. Gray, predictably, doesn't want to learn this the safe, slow way. He's spent a lifetime learning things the hard way, and he figures pouring his own vital force directly into his normal sword, skipping the demonic sword training wheels entirely, is just another shortcut he can muscle through. It is not a shortcut, it's a mistake that costs him an arm. The second he starts actively channeling his vital force, the dark power sealed inside him reacts like something's trying to invade territory it considers its own. There's no warning beyond a brief, sharp wrongness in his chest, and then it's just violence. His own dark energy rejecting his own life force in a feedback loop neither side backs down from, tearing through his right arm with a speed that doesn't give him time to stop it, doesn't give anyone time to intervene. 1 second his arm is there, channeling technique he's used 100 times in a different life. The next, it's disintegrating into ash right in front of him. It's not just painful, it's the kind of injury that should be permanent under normal circumstances. Not a wound you stitch up, not a break you set. Just gone, vaporized from the inside out. Ariel doesn't hesitate. She's got a resource most people at this academy don't even know exists. A mysterious hooded woman, someone whose real name and origin never actually surface anywhere in this story, but whose magic is powerful enough to do something that shouldn't be medically possible. Full limb regeneration, forbidden tear, agonizing to sit through but immediate in its results. Gray's arm comes back. Not instantly painless, not without cost, but back. Most people, staring down the reality that their own power just destroyed a piece of their own body, would take that as a sign to stop pushing so hard. Gray takes it as a problem with a solution he hasn't found yet. He goes right back to training. Not recklessly this time, carefully, deliberately, treating the failure like data instead of a warning to quit. Session after session, he works on isolating his vital force completely from the dark power sealed in his soul, building a kind of internal wall between the two, so neither one bleeds into the other's space. It's slow. It's exhausting. It's the kind of grinding, unglamorous training montage that doesn't make for a flashy fight scene but matters more than almost anything else he's done since waking up in this timeline. The payoff comes quietly, without an audience, without a crowd cheering him on the way they did after the tournament. Gray channels pure, isolated vital force through his ordinary sword and slices clean through a solid steel stake. No dark power involved at all. No backlash, no feedback loop threatening to cost him another limb. Just controlled strength, earned the hard way. Exactly the kind of discipline that separates a soldier who survives a real war from one who doesn't. That's the technique he's carrying into the fortress fight against Medu Bradley right now. The same isolated vital force that cost him an arm to learn, now the only thing keeping 3 first years alive against a threat the Academy itself would rate as above their pay grade. The fortress fight doesn't resolve clean. It's not supposed to. This isn't the kind of story where the underdog suddenly finds a hidden gear and one-shots the overpowered villain in her introduction fight. That's not what's actually happening here, and pretending otherwise would cheapen everything Gray's bled to build up to this point. What happens instead is worse, in the best possible way for a season finale. The standoff holds. Leon, Luniel, and Gray keep absorbing everything Medu throws at them, keep finding ways to cover each other's openings, keep refusing to let this become a repeat of what happened to Bard. But holding isn't winning, and somewhere in the back of Gray's head, underneath the calculation and the combat instinct, there's a colder realization settling in. This is only the first name on a list. Medu Bradley isn't the endgame. She's not even close to it. She's a modified, grieving, furious daughter of a dead scientist, armed with tech, built off research Gray personally cut short. And if someone this dangerous was just sitting in a Bloodbrinker fortress waiting to be triggered, that means whoever's still funding this operation has more of these waiting somewhere else. The fortress itself tells the same story. Buried deeper in the compound, past the sector where this fight's currently tearing the floor apart, there are cells, cages, people who were never supposed to walk out of this place, caught up in whatever trafficking pipeline the Bloodbrinkers were running through here before 3 first years and a corrupted mission accidentally kicked the door in. Rescuing them isn't going to be simple, and it isn't going to happen until this fight in front of them gets settled one way or another. That's the shape of the finale. Not a clean victory lap, not a tidy bow on the season. Just 3 exhausted, outmatched students standing their ground against something the Academy itself would rank above their level, refusing to break the way the guy who tried to save himself alone already did. And underneath all of it, the thread that's been running since the very first scene of this whole story hasn't gone anywhere. Somewhere out there, 15 years down the line, the Liquidator is still coming, still erasing legends in less time than it takes to blink. Still the reason a dead support soldier got dragged back through time by a horned deity with more questions attached to him than answers. Every conspiracy Gray's uncovered, Bradley's lab, Rada's trigger, Wormald's storm, and now Medu standing in the wreckage of a Bloodbrinker stronghold, traces back toward that same future. Someone, somewhere inside this world, already knows what's coming, and they're either trying to survive it or trying to make sure it happens right on schedule. Gray doesn't know which yet. That's the mystery this season leaves wide open, right alongside a dozen other loose threads nobody's gotten answers to. Who the hooded woman with god-tier regeneration magic actually is. What Kronos really wants out of sending a nobody support soldier back in time, instead of one of the legends who actually mattered. Whether there's a face behind the money that funded Bradley in the first place. What isn't a mystery is who Gray's become since that opening ceremony. A kid who walked into this academy branded a fraud, a charity case, a backdoor embarrassment nobody wanted standing in their school, and who's since torn apart 3 separate conspiracies, ended a 35-year losing streak, regrown a disintegrated arm through sheer stubbornness, and thrown himself into a fight against a special designation criminal without a second thought, because that's just what you do when you've already watched the alternative. The season ends right there, mid-fight, Mid-fortress, with Medu Bradley still standing, still dangerous, still very much not done, and 3 first-years who've earned every reason to believe they can survive this, even against odds that say otherwise. Because here's the thing about Gray that this entire story keeps circling back to. He already died once, watching the greatest heroes the world ever produced get wiped out for nothing. He came back for a second shot specifically so that wouldn't happen again. A grieving, overpowered assassin in an abandoned trafficking fortress is not the thing that's going to make him give up that fight. If anything, it's just the beginning of proving it. When Ariel first introduces the two of them, Bella doesn't come across like someone who needs saving. She's sharp, confident, clearly gifted, the kind of student who gets whispered about in hallways for all the right reasons. But Gray knows something nobody else in that room knows. In the future he remembers, this exact girl becomes the strongest sorcerer alive. Not a rising talent, not a promising prospect, the strongest, full stop. And right now, in this timeline, she's about to lose access to that future entirely because a professor named Bradley has convinced her that the fastest path to unlocking her real potential is letting him operate on her directly. It's framed as a breakthrough, cutting edge. An opportunity most students would kill for. Gray's seen this kind of language before, in a different context, in a different war. The way people in power always find pretty words for the ugly things they want to do to people who trust them. He doesn't try to talk her out of it with warnings. Warnings alone wouldn't work, not against a professor's credibility and not against a talented student's ambition. Instead, he offers her something better. Odo, the future-era life force theory nobody in this timeline has cracked yet. A way to unlock the exact same potential Bradley's surgery promises, except without a scalpel anywhere near her. Bella's skeptical at first, and fairly so. Some backdoor freshman she just met claiming to know magical theory more advanced than a full professor's research isn't exactly a claim you take on faith. But Gray doesn't just tell her. He shows her, walks her through the actual mechanics of separating raw life force from conventional ether casting, demonstrates the framework in a way that makes immediate, undeniable sense to someone with her level of natural talent. Watching her understand it in real time might be one of the quieter, more satisfying beats in this whole story. There's no explosion, no fight, no crowd watching. Just a girl who was about to let someone carve her open for power she could have reached safely all along, realizing exactly how close she came to a mistake she'd never walk back from. She turns Bradley down. Quietly, without drama, in a way that doesn't even tip him off that anything's actually wrong. Which turns out to matter later, because it's that same quiet refusal that keeps her safe enough to eventually go digging into what Bradley's really been doing in that mountain lab alongside Gray and Ariel. This is the pattern with Gray, if you zoom out far enough to see it. He doesn't save people through brute force alone, even though he's clearly capable of that too. Half the people he protects in this story, he saves with knowledge. Future theory, future context, the kind of information advantage that only exists because he's already lived through the mistakes this era hasn't made yet. Zarya doesn't die because Gray knows exactly when and where that ogre ambush happens. Bella doesn't get carved up because Gray knows exactly what future magic theory can replace Bradley's horrific shortcut. It's not raw power that makes Gray dangerous to the people threatening others. It's the fact that he's already seen how their plans end, and he's rewriting the ending before they get the chance to finish it. Which brings the story to Ariel, and the bond that ends up anchoring almost everything Gray does at this academy. Ariel's the one who brought him in through the divine eye in the first place, though the story never actually explains how she found him, or what exactly she saw that convinced her to bet her entire career on a random village kid with a busted right arm. What is clear is what that bet costs her. From the opening ceremony onward, Ariel's reputation is permanently tied to Gray's. Every time he's mocked as a backdoor charity case, some of that mockery lands on her too, the reckless teacher who threw away professional credibility on a gut feeling. She never once makes Gray feel like a burden for that. Not once. If anything, she leans harder into protecting him, the more the Academy's politics turn hostile. Healing his wounds personally after the ogre general coma, standing between him and Bruda's dismissive cruelty during the tournament fallout, managing his training schedule like someone genuinely invested in watching him succeed, rather than just proving a point. There's a moment worth sitting on properly. The tournament, right before Gray's fight against Rada, when Bruda's in the middle of publicly tearing into the entire Divine Eye program, using every ounce of institutional authority to to humiliate it in front of students and staff alike. Gray notices something nobody else seems to catch in that moment. Ariel's hands are shaking. Not from fear, not exactly. More like the exhausted tremor of someone who's spent months absorbing hits on someone else's behalf, and finally hitting the edge of what she can quietly carry. Gray doesn't hesitate. He steps forward, right there, in front of the same crowd that's been laughing at him since day one, and makes it personal. Doesn't just accept the tournament fight as an obligation, turns it into a promise, a public vow that he's going to prove her judgment right in front of everyone who ever doubted her for choosing him. That's not a small thing for someone like Gray to do. This is a person who's already survived the actual end of the world, who's watched loyalty and sacrifice mean absolutely nothing against something like the Liquidator. If anyone in this story has earned the right to be cynical about promises, it's him. And he makes one anyway, specifically for the one person who bet everything on a version of him nobody else could see yet. The rest of the tournament arc hits different once you know that context. Every exchange against Rada isn't just Gray fighting for his own reputation or the Divine Eye program's survival. It's Gray making good on a vow he made to someone who protected him without asking for anything back. And when he finally breaks that 35-year losing streak, when Bruda's forced to walk away in public humiliation, the win doesn't just land as satisfying. It lands as earned, personal, the kind of payoff that actually means something, because the emotional groundwork got put in first. That's the through line underneath everything else happening in this world. The Academy politics, the Bloodbrinker conspiracies, the future war bleeding into the present through Gray's dark power. Underneath all of it is a kid who died once feeling powerless, watching people he respected get erased without even the dignity of a real fight, and who spent every single day since his return making sure the people who trust him don't get that same ending. He doesn't always succeed. Bard's death in the fortress proves that clean. Some people make choices Gray can't undo no matter how much future knowledge he's carrying, and Bard's own instinct to protect himself first is exactly what got him killed. The one kind of danger Gray can warn against but can never fully control in someone else. That failure matters too. It's the reminder running underneath this entire story that Gray's knowledge of the future isn't some cheat code that guarantees everyone survives. It's an edge, not a guarantee. People still make their own choices. Some of those choices still end badly, no matter how much a time-displaced veteran soldier wishes otherwise. Which is exactly why the Fortress standoff against Medu Bradley carries the weight it does heading into the season's close. This isn't a fight Gray's confident about winning. It's a fight he's choosing anyway, because the alternative, retreating, leaving trafficking victims locked up somewhere deeper in that fortress, leaving Medu free to hunt whoever's left, isn't a version of this story Gray's willing to let happen if there's any way to stop it. Zoom back out one more time, because it's worth remembering exactly how far this kid's come since that opening ceremony. A backdoor student, publicly humiliated in front of the entire freshman class before he'd even said a word in his own defense. A teenager with a barely functional right arm, fighting a sword examiner left-handed just to earn his spot. Someone the Academy's top swordsman openly called a fraud. Someone corrupt professors saw as an easy target. Someone the system itself tried to expel not once, but twice. That same kid just spent this entire season proving every single one of those people catastrophically wrong. He's executed a corrupt human experimenter, ended a 35-year losing streak against a modified opponent nobody expected him to touch, exposed a murder plot mid-crisis, breaking down a traitor's lies in real time while a manufactured storm tried to kill an entire graduating class, regrown a disintegrated arm through pure stubbornness, and turned that failure into the exact technique keeping him alive against a special designation criminal right now. The Academy that tried to laugh him out the door on day one doesn't have a single reason left to call him a charity case. Everyone who mattered has already watched him prove otherwise, over and over, in front of the exact crowds that doubted him the loudest. And the story isn't done proving it, not even close. Because somewhere beyond this fortress, beyond Medu Bradley, beyond whoever's still funding the conspiracy that's been circling this academy since Bradley's lab first got exposed, there's still a future waiting 15 years down the line. A future where legends get erased in less time than it takes to blink. A future Gray already died trying to stop once. He's not planning on losing to it twice. That's where this season leaves things. Mid-fight, mid-fortress, with 3 exhausted first years refusing to break, and a war that's clearly bigger than any single enemy standing in front of them. The Liquidator's still out there. The mastermind behind Bradley's still unaccounted for. The hooded woman who regrew Gray's arm is still a mystery nobody's bothered to chase down yet. Kronos is still an unexplained deity, with motives nobody's questioned closely enough. But Gray's still standing too, still fighting, still exactly the kind of stubborn, quietly dangerous underdog who turned an entire academy's worth of doubt into fuel instead of letting it bury him. Whatever's coming next, that's not going to change.